Well, it's now 10:30, and that means it's time for Brainstorming the Human Connection, brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council in South Dakota. And my name is Lawrence Diggs. I will be the host and sometimes inquisitor on this program. And we will be having an interactive conversation. At least that's our objective, is to have an interactive conversation. And that means that we invite you to ask questions, to talk about your experiences, talk about the subject, bring it, and just not just between us, myself, or the guests today, but also between yourselves. That's why we do it. We call it brainstorming. Is that we're tossing around ideas. We'll get the conversation started, but you're also part of the conversation. So we hope that you will uh, join in this conversation. I'm not sure if all of you, or even most of you, are aware of a crisis that we've been actually talking about on this program before, but it can't be brought up too many times because it is indeed a crisis. And a crisis means that it is something that is in it's active now. It's a problem now, and it's a big problem now. And it's that some of our sisters, our Indigenous sisters, are in some crazy proportion going missing and murdered. And it just has a chilling kind of effect. And emotionally, it's destabilizing. So when we think about it, so it may be a hard subject to put our hearts and minds around, but we have to keep at it. We have to keep bringing this up and spreading it around and talking about it, and not just talking about it and commiserating. We need to solve this. We need to really be looking at what each of us can do. So, for that reason, we are today going to have another conversation about murdered and missing uh, Indigenous women. My guest today is Melinda Janko, and she is a director and a producer of a film about this. And she's also the executive director of the Women Are Sacred movement. We'll have a link to the website in the chat. So we hope that you will go in the chat and go, you know, download that. There's three little dots. I guess we can call them not buttons, but dots at the bottom of the chat screen, and you can actually download the whole chat because we'll have other links and things for you um, in that chat link box. My guest today is Melinda Janko. And welcome, Melinda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. It's nice to be here.
We're going to be talking a little later about the film, but I think um, I want to start off by giving people the 50,000-foot view, the stats, or just give people, bring them up to speed about this crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women.
Sure, I'd be happy to share that with you. The stats are basically the reason I got involved in this. I had the opportunity to watch the movie Wind River, which is about a Native American woman that goes missing and is found murdered. And at the end of that film, it said in the title card, when a Native American woman goes missing, there is no accountability. They are the only group in the United States of all the ethnicities that are not unaccounted for by the federal government. And when I saw that, I had to watch it again. I watched the movie twice. And when I saw that again, I said, that's it. That has to be my next film. And so this, and I could go on and on. They say 3 out of 4 Native women experience violence in their lifetimes. And the Native women that I know always ask, they want to know who the 4th woman is, because they don't know anybody. They have they are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other group of women. And the domestic violence rates are extremely high, for a number of reasons. One of them, intergenerational trauma from boarding schools, etc. But the statistics are very dire.
Yes.
Dire.
Yeah, I think getting to that point, there was something you and I talked about having to do with the Oliphant decision. The Supreme Court held in Oliphant versus Suquamish, the Suquamish Indian tribe, and uh, I think the docket was 435 US 191 in 1978, that the tribes didn't have authority to try non-Indians when they became, once the native became dependents of the United States. Can you elaborate on that and tell us about what was that all about?
Okay, so the Oliphant ruling was brought about by a David Oliphant, and he was attending. And let me just say that 50% of the residents that live uh, on tribal lands are non-natives. So David was attending a Native American ceremony, and he got drunk and out of control, and he was arrested by the tribal police. Well, he took his case all the way to the Supreme Court on the basis that he should not be held accountable. He is a white guy, and why should he be reporting or accountable to a tribal nation when he's not part of that tribal nation? And the real sad fact of the matter is that Supreme Court agreed with that. So they ruled on the Oliphant, Oliphant decision in 1978. That essentially opened the door for white people to set one foot on a reservation, knowing that they could rape a woman, they could murder a woman, and they could get away with it. Now, when I say murder, the FBI is supposed to be called in if there is a murder. But the problem is that the FBI has a something like 80% decline rate. So there's really no justice there. And there was actually people that, bad people that would go on the dark web and learn how to rape a woman and get away with it in Indian country. So it's what I call it's an open season.
Mhm.
And so that was another thing that I read about that I was devastated by. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And so as part of what I do in this Women Are Sacred campaign movement is that we have a 3-step goal. One is a documentary series to educate the public and about this silent crisis. The second one is a social impact campaign, educational campaign. And the third one is we want to reverse Oliphant. So we want to do a lobbying campaign to reverse the Oliphant ruling.
Right. As I'm looking at and considering that Oliphant ruling, it does say that they can't have the jurisdiction unless Congress authorizes it. So isn't it possible to create a law that that's more specific and addresses this? And has this been tried? And if so, what has been the results of that?
No, but I know that there are things in the works through through Native American Rights Fund. And they are the organization that for over 50 years provides tribal nations with, they are lawyers. And so they are addressing this right to this day. They are working to try to introduce it to Congress through another bill. So yes, there are recourses. It's very hard to get things passed through Congress, as everybody knows.
Mhm.
Um, and in the past, even before things got so kind of dysfunctional, um, there were people that, a lot of people that didn't take to the Native American cause very well. Uh,
Mhm.
and so it's been a challenge.
It would seem like that, if not at this moment, soon after this moment, that we should be um, looking at changing the law. It just
Oh,
seems like
absolutely.
that gets right to the core of it. And then the Supreme Court would then have to say, well, the law is unconstitutional, and that I think that would be a hard sell, uh, especially once you've actually passed that law. Um, so I guess it seems like that is a focus that should be had. Can you tell us more along with that? Can you tell us more about the statistics of how what's the estimation of women that have gone missing or murdered
Well,
from?
because there is no accountability, I don't have those numbers, but I can tell you that NCIC, which is a National Crime Institute, I think it is, they in 2016 came out with a figure, 5,706 women, Native
Mm,
women, were
mm.
found missing that year.
Oh,
Now
that
that's staggering for me. I,
no,
I,
that
I
is scary.
I'm
Yes.
I'm not I'm not sure what that number represents. I'm not sure if that's what they found out in 2016 from going back, but they announced that in 2016.
Mhm. That is a staggering number, but it seems like part of the campaign, just to put it into perspective and to bring it into sharp focus, it would just seem like even if the FBI isn't doing it, that the rest of us doesn't mean that it can't be done. It's just a matter of seems like getting more the data out there because if we're going to look at passing a law, changing the law, uh, those kind of things are going to be useful. Those kind of numbers will be useful,
Of course.
um, and bring it into focus. So, so I'm just wondering, who would you think, based on the people that you've been in contact with as a result of your movement, who would be some of the people that might um, be positioned, should they have the resources, who would be positioned to do that on behalf of all of the tribes?
Well, as I mentioned, the Native American Rights Fund.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
they are the organization that represents the tribes all over the country and in Alaska, um, on any legal issues that they have. And of course, this is a big one. And so they are that organization.
Right. Well, let's turn now to talk about the film because I think that's going to be the tip of the spear, so to speak, for many of us to bringing this crisis to the mind, to top of mind. Colby, can we see the trailer? We're going to take a look at the trailer, and I will say for all of us, if you can't hear the sound, you might need to adjust your sound if it's too low or too high because it's coming off of a link from a Vimeo, and sometimes their computer talk doesn't match with other people's computer talk. So you adjust your sound as necessary. Can we roll that, Colby?
Today in America, there's a silent crisis.
The crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
4 out of 5 will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
And they are 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other group of women.
The reality is, there is no federal database for missing Native women and girls.
They're the only group in the U.S. who are unaccounted for.
In 1978, the Supreme Court's Oliphant ruling took away tribal rights to prosecute non-natives who commit crimes against our people.
In And that makes it open season on all of us.
We have an epidemic on our hands. Native Americans across this country are dealing with violence much higher rate than the rest of the population.
Criminals go where there are vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, there are vulnerabilities in Indian country.
I think it's tragic.
Police decided to fetch. My husband posted on Facebook that her kids were kidnapped. Who kidnapped them? They don't know. They said it was a red van. They haven't sent an Amber Alert. I'm pretty much frustrated.
Authorities say they discovered the body of 11-year-old Ashlyn Mike in a remote area on the Navajo Nation near Shiprock, New Mexico.
There's story after story after story like that.
Some of these victims are as young as 7 or 8 years old that are victims of homicide.
We know that it's not just random occurrences. It's not just a coincidence that these stories aren't told.
The whole purpose of genocide ultimately is eradication, annihilation that we ever existed on the planet.
My sister Jessica, she was a really beautiful person.
Marlene was murdered. Her unborn baby was murdered.
Creator, come on. Help us stop this. Bring this to an end.
Held my breath, said a prayer. All those people waiting there, burned me in the desert and drowned me in the rain.
Clearly, she was shot in the head. We know how she died.
We can't wait hours, days, weeks.
Throw me to the thunder, push me over the flame.
I just want everyone to know that every one of these women are important and they're human.
And it's just going to keep going until somebody cares.
What happens to the earth happens to the women of the earth.
And we need to never forget, and we need to not let it happen anymore. That's the dream. That's the dream.
Thank you, Colby. So let's talk a little bit about what the film is trying to accomplish from your point of view as a director, producer. What do you want the film to do?
Well, as producer and director, I have seen several there. I think there have been about 4 or 5 documentary films that have been done on this issue. And they were well done and they were very good. But what they didn't go into, and I think that's why I decided to do a series, a 4-part series, is the 500-year history of violence against Native women. Native women in their tribes are sacred. The men don't go into battle normally until they talk to the women. They have always been considered sacred. They're the mothers, they're the, the life givers. And so if someone committed a rape against a Native woman, early on, before colonization, they could have been killed, excommunicated at the least, but by the tribe. And so now you take that information and you look 400 to 500 years to where we are today, and you see the statistics, which are absolutely mind-blowing. And I don't know, I say, like, how can this be happening in our country? How can this be happening? And so that's what prompted me to tell this story, is the outrage that I myself have as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother. It is absolutely unconscionable. And so my goal as a director and producer of a series is to address going back to that 500-year period before colonization, the sacredness of women, and what has happened, throughout the course of history, including 1978, Oliphant ruling, that has brought us to this place. And, there's a lot of people, my prior film, 100 Years, One Woman's Fight for Justice, about Eloise Cobell's historic landmark victory in a $3.4 billion settlement for 300,000 Native families, gave me such a love of the Native people. I journeyed for 12 years on that film. And so when I met the Native people, I fell in love with them. I saw the people that are so oppressed, that have such beautiful spirits. They are the salt of the earth. They laugh, they joke, they have a good time despite what they've been through from colonization, boarding schools, horrific experiences. I could go on and on. But this to me is a horrible, horrible black stain on our country.
So the film, you said that there are four
It's a
there's
four
four-part
episode.
series. It's a four-part series. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us about what each parts of the series are aimed to do? Because I'm trying to get a sense of like how they all come together to tell which
Sure.
story.
Well, we want to establish early on sacredness and the history before colonization. And we have been filming since 2019. We were shut down for 2 years because of COVID, but we have now completed 50% of our production. And so we have journeyed to places like, actually, we have not filmed in South Dakota, but we filmed a story about a woman from South Dakota, from Pine Ridge, who was sexually assaulted by a non-native, a man from the Army. And he was a recruiter. And he raped this native woman. Lavetta Elk is her name. And picked her up, and the circumstances are horrible. She wanted to be a nurse in the Army, and because her family came from that background, and so she went to apply, and she met this recruiter, and he took her to get her physical, etc., and do all the paperwork. And then I guess a year later, he contacted her and said, "Oops, they lost the paperwork, so I'm going to have to pick you up and take you back to the clinic." Well, that's not where he took her. He was on the reservation. He knew he had full impunity. He took her to a part of the reservation and raped her. Now, when she went to file a lawsuit, well, there was nothing that she could do because of Oliphant. Oh, but there was. There was such a thing called the Badman's Treaty, the Badman's Clause. I think it was from I want to say 68, around that area, when they wrote in the treaties that in the case that a white man, if there be a bad man amongst them, commits a crime, he will be held accountable. And so she filed a civil lawsuit, and she won a $650,000 settlement. That's a very rare thing. But she was able to apply that clause from the treaty, and we will be addressing those cases, those issues. The fact that there is such a thing called a bad man's clause is shocking to me. So we'll be covering points like, the Violence Against Women Act. We're meeting with all the families. And we're tying their stories. We just got back in, I think it was 22 from we filmed in Alaska for 9 days. And the situation there is even worse than it is here on the mainland. 40% of the tribes, the Alaska tribes, have no public safety, none. And there's no roads into them or roads out. You can only get there by plane or boat. So we talked to the families out there, and the leaders out there who have witnessed this lack of protection. And we interviewed the Judy Lee Guthrie family. So, and then when we were in Montana, we interviewed Melinda Limberhan, and her daughter Hannah was murdered. And it was Melinda who had to basically do the search for her daughter's murderers, because the tribal police are so underfunded that they can't cover these issues. They cannot investigate these issues. Somebody who's murdered is left to the FBI. And as I said, there's a very high decline rate for those cases. So Melinda was able to find the women who murdered her, the woman and the man who murdered her daughter, put her in a plastic bag and tossed her out like trash. And so we went to visit Melinda and her son, Jeremiah, who was 10 years old and was 10 months old when his mother was taken from him. So we weave, and in between that, in covering the issues of Violence Against Women Act and how Native American women were left out when that was first introduced in, believe it was 1994. The first Violence Against Women Act did not include anything applying to Native women. It wasn't until 2019 that they put a little clause in there about non-natives on the reservation who commit, who are domestic violence offenders. That's when they kind of got what they call a sliver of a full moon, a little bit of representation, but not much.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and then we have, and I'll just finish on this one piece of it. As you saw in the trailer, we had a woman, the woman that breaks down crying. She's a prayer runner. And she is a Native woman who for 3 years, she ran from sunrise to sunset every single day for missing Native women. And along the way, she would gather acorns, sumac, leaves, flowers, and create these beautiful sacred altars. And so we filmed her about a year or 2 years ago. And her story, because she's done this for so long, and every time she runs, she's running for a particular missing woman. So her story will be woven throughout the series.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to open it up to our other panelists here. Anyone have any other questions before we get back to our interview? Questions, stories that you want to relate? Anyone?
Have you received the resistance, Melinda, from stepping in and looking into this from any of the tribes in the areas you've gone? Are you yourself then non-native going in to tell their stories? Is that the case? Have you received any resistance, or are they glad for that, for having somebody that's non-native try to assist or tell their stories?
You know, that's a very good question, Deb. And because of my 12 years spent in Indian country covering my last film, 100 Years, I have been embraced by the Native people. Now, we do go in, as a matter of fact, I've just been invited to a Barona tribe, which is, I live in San Diego and they're in the San Diego area, to present to the tribal council a proposal for Women Are Sacred. I'm very, very honored to be recognized and embraced by the Native people. And I have quite a few letters of support from them. And also the affiliated tribes of the West passed a resolution in support of the film. And they represent 48 tribes. So we are very blessed to be acknowledged and thanked for our efforts. It means the world to us. We do take security with us wherever we go because of this issue. And for instance, we were filming in the Yakima area of Washington, and there's a lot of gangs up there. And there were a few times that we were pretty concerned. We were told that we didn't need a security person, but we really did. So I have decided that from now on, whenever we book our next, any other shoots that we have, we book security first. Because it is something that is, we actually had 2 security guards, and they're basically tribal security that are off duty and that work for us. But thank you for that question, because it's true. And it took me, as a non-Native woman, 2 years to build relationships of trust before I could tell the Eloise Cobell story in 100 Years.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Anyone else? You just have to turn on your mic if you're trying to say something. Well, while you're thinking about more questions, I will continue. Tell us a little bit more about the structure of your work in terms of like how you get people to tell stories. And I'm still a little bit unclear about how the 4 separate parts of the series come together. I was hoping you could like give us a like part 1 tells this story, part 2 tells this story. So, and will we need to wait until the whole thing is finished to get the, before it's released, or how is all of that working?
Well, we are in production, and the way I see it is that it starts 500 years ago. So we lay out that groundwork, and that's why I was talking about the certain laws. So like, for instance, the Bad Man Clause, well, that's from 76 or around that area. And then we'll go into, as along the way of these, going through and telling these stories of the people, we'll wrap it up with, we'll tie into, like, so for example, the Bad Man Clause will probably be in the first episode. And then we'll go into the Tribal Law and Order Act, and then we'll go into the Oliphant ruling, and then, various points of the process of not just these women going missing, but the lack of progress in protecting these women from our country. So when you have to think about, the fact there was no representation in the Violence Against Women Act until 2019, and that thing came out in 94. there's a great resistance. It's almost like Native women don't exist. And so we will be bringing up these laws all the way through and shining a bright light on them, the omission of them, as we tell the stories of our families, of the missing, families like Melinda Limberhand. Now, and here's an example of how her story will be woven. Melinda went on to find single-handedly the killers, that murdered her daughter. She then went on to lobby, and she's another hero. She's another warrior, which I've met a lot. Indian women that are warriors. And she's one of them. So she then went to Montana state legislation and she lobbied them to create a MMIW annual awareness day and it was for May 5th, which was her daughter's birthday. So that was passed by the Montana legislation. Then she took it all the way to the White House. And they passed, under the Trump administration, a national day for the country for awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women. So, and those stories of the women warriors, like I said, there's many, will be woven throughout this film. So I can't really tell you what exactly episode 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to look like, because we don't really know right now. We just know the direction that we're going, and we're not done filming.
Okay, but I guess I was looking not so much that you were done filming, but that you're planning in terms of all the things you want to put in, whether or not it was there yet, so that we can start talking about what's going to be in it as people who know about it now. And word of mouth can be pretty powerful, and the more we know about what we expect to be in the film, because you've already, let's say, scripted it out, then the more and more authoritatively we can talk about it and get you some
Well,
more.
I can tell you, for instance, what's on our remaining, list of shots of production. We want to spend time in North Dakota. We're going to be out there filming at the Fort Berthold Reservation, because I was out there actually covering my other film when the oil boom, the Bakken oil boom was going on, and they had an increased rate of abductions of Native women, because when you have an oil boom and they set up these man camps, then their girls are abducted, they're raped, they're used for sex trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be going out there. We're going to be filming that situation then, what happened, talking to people. We're going to be addressing Matthew Lone Bear. His sister went missing at that time, and he created the first protocol for Native tribes to use, because there's nothing out there for tribes when their relatives go missing. There was no protocol. There's no Amber Alerts. Okay, so they don't have the same kind of publicity that Gabby Petito had when she went missing. They don't. They just don't. So
I was just going to say, it seems though that when we know that, for example, I had no idea that when they had that Amber Alerts weren't available to people, because it seems like when people went missing here, you hear about it on the radio. So I wasn't aware that it wasn't part of the Amber Alert, because I guess I don't have the kind of phone that would ring me.
No. That's why in the trailer we put that part about this, woman calling and saying there's no Amber Alerts. I mean, they didn't put out an Amber Alert. There are no Amber Alerts on the reservations. None of them. So it's like they're a foreign country. They don't exist. And so what they are doing now I just was out there interviewing in Washington State of Yakima, and I introduced Representative Deborah Lakonoff. And she's actually from Alaska, but now she's living in Washington State and very involved in this issue. And they have created, I don't know if they call them feather alerts or what, but they are one of the states. And I keep going wherever I go to shoot. I keep saying, please, please give me some good news. I need some good news. And they said, this is what we've created. And Washington State has been a very progressive state for attacking this issue. And they have passed this feather alert. So she told me the story of her driving down the highway, seeing this. If you've seen the Amber Alerts on the highway in your own states,
I haven't, but
this feather alert that says, missing woman last seen, abducted last seen in a gray van. And she saw that come as she was driving. Well, one of her friends saw that as well. She got off the road. She was driving home from work late, and she passed a green van on the side of the road. And she called in as a result of that feather alert, and they were able to rescue this woman. So and here we are, 2024. Now think what it could have been like if this had been going on ever since, like, let's say, just say 2010, there would have been, so there's momentum now. And that's why I'm so happy to be working on this now, because there's movement in Washington State, there's movement in other states, and we want to show that progress. We don't want to just tell the sad story. We want to show the stories of hope. And that story right there gives me hope.
Is there anyone else who has a question? Well, I want to get back to this issue, but is there anyone else who has a question or comment about murdered or missing Indigenous women?
I have another question. Deb had posted in the chat about grants and opportunities for libraries. I'm the director of Gregory Public Library here in South Dakota, and just had a question about that, about bringing these programs, bringing speakers in, holding these conversations within our small and rural communities as well that are close to some of the reservations here in South Dakota. Do you offer those opportunities? Are you someone that we can contact to come in and present this? Not everybody has this platform of Zoom or access to the South Dakota
Right.
Humanities to visit with you in this, and it's only limited to our 1 hour right now. But if we can bring this in and offer 3 hours or whatever the case may be, of having these conversations within our communities and bringing people together, I think that that's important, and wondering if that's something that you offer as well, and then if there'll be follow-up contact of how we can reach out to you.
Well, we are seeking grants to support this project, this campaign. Anywhere we go, and I'd like to say, first of all, thank you for South Dakota for not only doing this, but also supporting my film 100 Years, many years ago. And so I am presenting actually to Barona Tribe, as I mentioned earlier, to their tribal council. Of course, they're very familiar with this issue, but we're seeking a grant from them. So we are in need of grants from anywhere that you can think of. And yes, I can speak offline with you about what you would like to do. And yeah.
She can get in touch with you through your website too, I imagine, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that is one. There's a dog who wants to say something, I think.
Yeah, no, it's my email is mjanko2 at AOL.
Okay. All right. So getting back to the production of your film, because I think ultimately that's going to be as I said before, a tip of the spear for many people. That's how they're going to come to know about it. I'm happy that Tara also had some ideas about, getting people into the libraries, and I think those are opportunities. But let's say, for example, like here in South Dakota, if you're on if you had a speaker that was designated, it's kind of hard to bring somebody each time out, from Washington or Oregon or, the West Coast out there. But if there was like two or three people who were speakers who were available to talk about that, then we could conceivably talk that up, with the various book clubs, that
Right.
because they're on the subject, et cetera, to get more grassroots support for this. Because for me, I'm very excited and and always supportive of films trying to get these issues out and having the story told. But what I don't like is just for the thing to become kind of like commiseration talk, because people are being killed, murdered, raped.
Right. Yeah, we
So
don't want
just being commiserating doesn't work for me.
no,
I
it
like to
doesn't
see
work.
solutions. I like to see something move.
Well, that's the name of the game. That's what
Yes.
it is. And that's why I do what I do, because I have a heart for social justice. And I could not, it keeps me up at night. What's going on. And like I said, after I saw Wind River, and if you haven't seen Wind River, I think it's on Netflix, but I would recommend all of you to watch that film. Because it's very powerful, and it's kudos to Taylor Sheridan, who was the director and brought this issue to light several years ago. So yeah, yeah, we mean business. That's why we have a three-part campaign, the film series, the social impact campaign, which is very important arm of our activism, and also the lobbying campaign. That has to come after both the social impact campaign and the film, because we've got to educate people first. And I'm very proud of 100 Years, because it had 2 years on Netflix, 2 years on PBS. It is now being taught in public schools in 25 states and in colleges, universities, and law schools all around the world. And that is my model for Women Are Sacred.
That brings up another potential venue for getting the issue out, and that is, we have book clubs. I thinking now maybe we should have some film clubs as well, where we just sort of show up, at people's houses, show a film, especially if these things are on Netflix and stuff like that. You can show it in your house. Just invite people over to your house and put it on, put on Netflix and then have discussions afterward, just like you discuss a book. But in that case, you don't have to rely on the people actually read the book. You can actually be there and you know that they saw the film,
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good point. That's a good point.
And I think that it also, as a film producer, it just says that, okay, this is another way to get films out, especially socially relevant films. It's a way to maybe get them screened, is to create something of a kind of a film club and create that whole, sort of network, so that we know what films are out there, where we can find them. And so when films like yours come out, it's great if it's on Netflix, and that can be a platform. But having it available, even if it's for download, or something like that, but
No,
when it's a
right.
message when it's about getting a message out.
Well, the problem with that, just because it's a, distribution issue, and I have an educational distributor to this day, and that film 100 Years was released in 2016. And here we are in 2024, and we still have an educational distributor. So it's kind of a fine line, but I was on the film circuit for 2 years after 100 Years came out. I spoke to colleges, universities all around the country. And it is a, I can't say I spoke at any book clubs or film clubs, but there were mostly institutions like colleges, universities that brought me out, and the tribes that brought me
Yeah.
out,
Right. Well, I think the other thing is that it's the institutions, because the institutions have people who know about it, and people also approach institutions. And if you don't have networks that you can suggest this to, if there's no, if there's no structure for people to be aware of it, like many things that are worthy, they go unnoticed because there's no viewing port. There's no way that people know about it. So it's the old story of winking at a pretty girl in the dark. Nothing doesn't happen. So I'm just thinking now forward about how we get your message out. When do you expect your film to be done, or what are the obstacles? What do you need to finish up the project?
Well, we need $600,000 to complete production and editing and music, etc. We do usually an original sound mix and music. So we are right now in the fundraising. We were very, very blessed. In 2021, we received funding from Melinda Gates, Pivotal Ventures, her group, which she is newly formed, I think only a few years ago. So, and then we've received some other funding from some other tribes, Puyallup tribe out of Washington State, and the Chumash tribe in California. So, and that's, if we do a lobbying campaign, that's going to be a whole nother, line item, which is very, very expensive. But we're hoping that with the Native American Rights Fund, that they will get their bill ready and can address it. And then the social impact campaign is another budget of about between 75,000 and 100,000. So we are actively fundraising to complete the series. And our goal is to have the rest of it shot this year, and then to begin post-production next year, and perhaps have it released at the middle of the year. So it's a very, very long process, and it's a very interesting and worthwhile process, because the power of film, there's nothing like it.
Yes.
And I'm very blessed to be in this arena. And believe me when I say I am blessed, because I would say maybe 1% of documentary filmmakers get their films seen.
Right.
So
I will say that as a documentary producer, one of the problems is that despite how good we might be at producing the documentaries, we're usually kind of poor at marketing and getting our messages out. So that a lot of times, one, we have a hard time getting funded.
Right.
We're not as creative as we could be about how to just get it done, as opposed to waiting for money. We're not as creative.
You just hit the nail on the head.
You
You hit the nail on the head, because I got to tell you, I'm a very creative person. I just want to zero in on what I have to create. I don't really want to go fundraise.
Exactly.
And that's why we were so blessed to have Melinda Gates step up so early on, that we could have so much traction right now, in our production. And we've, like I said, 50%. So it's not my favorite thing to do. And so I look to those around me, and the people who are very interested in this issue to also kind of brainstorm, you know, who do you know that maybe somebody, you know, out there that you know that has a, and I do, by the way, FYI, I do operate a 501c3. So my 501c3 is Women Are Sacred Movement, and it is nonprofit.
Okay. Before we go any further, do we have anyone in our audience who might have a suggestion about how we can help move this project forward? I mean, okay, money is a thing, but that's pretty straightforward. You know, you donate or not donate or suggest somewhere they can get money. But I don't like money to be the master. So are there other things we can do to put wind in Melinda's sail and the project here? Well, and I'm focused on the issue. The film is one of the things to help push the issue, but the real thing is the issue. What can any of us or all of us do to bring this issue to top of mind to more Americans?
Talk it up.
Yeah, but I'm asking the rest of our audience here. I'm
Yeah.
trying to, yeah, but yes, talk it up. That's one. Anybody else? Looking for some creativity.
I
Anything
just
you
think collaboration is such a key thing, and inviting the tribal leaders in.
Yep.
This discussion alone here can feel one-sided if we're not hearing what they need help with, you know, how we can spread the word. That I think that's the biggest thing as far as respect and sensitivity as well. You need to ask on the level of where it's occurring most, how you can help, you know, what we can do instead of us sitting out here on the outside making those decisions for them as well. I think the collaborations, the conversations, I think having this, I had said in my little evaluation, longer than 1 hour is, you know, something we need, and inviting those voices into this discussion, so we're asking what we can do beyond this instead of us sitting here as well. That'll be helpful to know how to go forward in our own community, spreading the word. So
I have a suggestion. I
Sure.
would say to every single one of you, reach out to your representatives, your state representatives. Reach out to them. Ask them where do we stand in South Dakota on this issue? Are you aware of this issue? Have a conversation with the people that represent you in the government. Your congressmen, your senators, your representatives. They know this issue is out there, but if they know that their constituents want to know what they're doing, that puts pressure on them. And the louder the voices are, the more action you're going to get.
Yes, and I would say add to that is one of the ways that you get even more attention is to invite 4 or 5 people to dinner, have the conversation, you all write a letter and all sign it, and you start sending those letters, because then it starts to feel like the Mongols are on the hill now, you know. So people start, they'll pay a lot of attention to you, and don't underestimate the power of a letter when you know, because they know that, especially if they know people are talking about it, that gets people's attention. Then when you actually go to meet with them or confront them at one of these Cracker Barrels or things, or when they're going around looking for votes and people get together and you raise that issue, it isn't the first time they would have heard it. And we're in election season now. So if you show up and spread your people around the room and ask 4 or 5 different questions about this issue, and it keeps coming up, then you know, then it really it starts to get the attention it deserves, I believe.
And one other thing I'd like to add to that, I want to invite any of you to use the trailer that you saw from the website to educate. If you have a small group at home that you bring in, neighbors, whatever, and you want to show them, the power of film is very, very powerful. So by showing them that 3-minute trailer, which you can, take from my website, womenaresacredcampaign.com, you're free to use that for education.
Yes. And with that, we have run out of time. As Tara said, we almost never have enough time for these subjects, but I think you could fill a lot of time with these. So let's do something with the time that we have made available. Let's make this work. Let's do something instead of just talking about it. Thank you so much, Melinda, for joining us, and thank all of you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Same station next week. See you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye.